Harry and Meghan, I mean, we can't have a chat without mentioning those two. Their representative has hit back after more than 35,000 people signed a petition demanding no taxpayer money be spent on their upcoming visit to Australia.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are clearly not happy about this Australian petition that's gaining some traction. So much so they had their spokesman actually respond to it.
I think Harry wants to go home. I think that he's built the Invictus around going home, the next Invictus all around making nice with his family so he could try to worm his way back in. I truly do believe that there is an ulterior.
There's a rule in royal communications that every PR professional learns before they learn anything else. Never complain, never explain. It is not a suggestion. It is the load-bearing wall of the entire operation. The moment you respond to a critic, to a petition, to a tabloid, you have handed them something they did not have before. Proof that it landed. This week, a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex looked at a petition signed by 35,000 Australians, looked at it, and typed a response. Of course, if you wanted to dive into the ridiculousness of this petition as an agenda for spreading misinformation, stop. That word, ridiculousness. Directed at 35,000 named organised people, people who signed their names. That is not a slip. That is a choice. Keep reading. One could equally hypothesize that there are approximately 26.5 million Australians, 99.98% of the population, who haven't signed it, who must therefore agree with the taxpayer picking up the tab. Read that again. 26.5 million people who have never heard of this petition, who have never been asked, who were going about their Tuesday, conscripted, in an official spokesperson statement, as silent supporters. That is a real statement, issued this week by a professional communications team, on behalf of a couple who reportedly pays for the best PR money can buy. And that statement, that single, extraordinary statement, is not even the most explosive thing happening to this couple right now. Because in the same week that landed, their neighbours started talking to the press. Their publisher stopped pretending the royalty calls are going anywhere. Hollywood, the Hollywood that was supposed to be the soft landing after the palace, has gone quiet in ways that people inside that world are starting to notice. And there is a 464-page book, written by the one biographer who has never lost a lawsuit, coming out this month, called Betrayal. The people closest to the Sussexes have reportedly been dreading that book for months. I'm going to tell you exactly what broke first, the reputation or the money. I'm going to show you why Australia remembered something the couple apparently forgot. And I'm going to tell you what Tom Bower's book represents, not just for the Sussexes, but for everyone who has been watching this operation and waiting for the moment the whole structure became visible. But not yet. Because before any of that makes sense, you need to hear what 35,000 Australians actually remember, and why the spokesperson statement, the one that is already being screenshotted and shared across every royal forum on the internet, may be the single most revealing thing this couple has ever put on public record. Before we go further, subscribe, because what's coming out of Montecito right now is something nobody in their circle predicted. And this one is not over.
Australia, the entire continent and country, don't really want Harry and Meghan to visit. This is one of, I think, the biggest rebukes the couple have had on their cosplay royal tours, where at least 35,000 people have signed a petition in Australia to go, no, we don't want to pay for these two. And Harry and Meghan are so miffed by this, they're actually lashing out at the poll.
And what came out of that phone call may be the single most tone-deaf statement this couple has ever put their name to. And trust me, that is a very competitive field. So today we are going to break down exactly what happened.
The petition went up on November 14th, 2025. By the evening of March 24th, 2026, it had 32,715 signatures. By the following morning, 35,000. The group behind it calls itself Beyond Australia. Everyday Australians, they say, demanding fairness and accountability. The petition is addressed to the Attorney General, to the NSW Premier, to the Department of Home Affairs, which has already said it has no involvement in the visit, to the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, which has said the same thing. A separate poll, 40,000 respondents run independently, found that 98% believed the couple should foot their own bill. A different survey put opposition to the visit at 95%. No other celebrity visit to Australia in living memory has generated numbers like this. Before the plane has left the ground, the spokesperson had options. Say nothing. Issue a one-line confirmation that the trip is privately funded. Let the petition exhaust itself in 3 news cycles. Every one of those options ends the story. It's a moot point. The trip is being funded privately, so I'm not sure what this petition hopes to achieve. That's the opening. Reasonable? Just about. Keep going. Of course, if you wanted to dive into the ridiculousness of this petition as an agenda for spreading misinformation, ridiculousness. There it is again. One could equally hypothesize that there are approximately 26.5 million Australians, 99.98% of the population, who haven't signed it, who must therefore agree with the taxpayer picking up the tab for their visit. Then this. Of course, that is another equally stupid assertion to make, but hey, why let common sense get in the way of a good story? Stupid, ridiculous, misinformation. 3 words that did not exist in this story before that statement was issued. The spokesperson put them there, handed them directly to every outlet covering the visit, gift-wrapped. Here's the thing about Australia. It is not a country that turns on celebrities easily. The welcome mat goes out, the crowds show up, the coverage is warm in ways that even the British press occasionally isn't. In October 2018, Harry and Meghan landed in Sydney for the Commonwealth tour. The crowds were enormous. The coverage was genuinely affectionate. She was pregnant with Archie. He was visibly happy. The image the palace wanted, a modern royal couple, accessible, warm, globally relevant, was playing out in real time on every front page in the country. That was the public picture. What royal biographer, Angela Levin, documented from that same tour tells a different story. Levin, who had spent months with Harry for her 2018 book, who had access that very few journalists have ever had, reported that Meghan was extremely rude to staff during the Commonwealth tour. The hot tea incident, the pattern of behaviour toward the people working below stairs, the ones who actually know what happens on a royal visit. Australia remembers the crowds, the staff remember everything else, and 35,000 people signing a petition before a return visit suggests that somewhere between 2018 and now, the second version of that story travelled further than the palace ever intended. Quick question before we go further. When a spokesperson responds to 35,000 people's concerns by calling them ridiculous, invoking the silence of 26 million people who never heard of the petition as proof of support, and handing every critic of this couple a ready-made exhibit of everything that has gone wrong with their communications. Are they protecting their client or destroying them? Drop it in the comments. Protecting or destroying? I'm reading every one. There are 4 people you need to know to understand this story. The first is Meghan, not the tabloid version, not the palace version, the version this story actually reveals. A woman whose instinct at every crisis point is to fight back in ways that guarantee worse outcomes. Not a villain. Someone who has never learned that silence is a strategy. That pattern is the engine of everything you're about to hear. Harry is present in this story, but peripheral in the early stages. His role is the enabler, the man whose title made the whole commercial operation possible, now watching it stall from a $14 million property in Montecito, while the phone calls to London go unanswered. His reckoning comes later. The spokesperson is anonymous, but they are one of the most consequential figures in this story. Their job was to say nothing. They stood at a fork in the road this week and took the wrong turn at speed. Every word of that statement is a window into the decision-making at the centre of the Sussex operation. And then there is Kinsey Schofield, professional royal commentator, Measured, consistent, on record. She watched the statement land and said what every communications professional in the world was already thinking. Her verdict comes later. When it does, it lands harder for the wait.
Harry and Meghan want the freebies as much as possible. Part of the reason Meghan left the royal family is that she wasn't allowed to keep her freebies, and she desperately wanted to keep her freebies. So, yeah, that's a bit. And he says, Paul, do you think Harry and Meghan should foot the bill?
The 2018 Commonwealth tour was the peak. That is not a contested claim. The coverage was extraordinary. The crowds in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Fraser Island, genuinely enormous, genuinely warm. She was pregnant. He was present in a way the cameras caught and the public felt. If you had stopped the clock in October 2018 and asked the world what it thought of Harry and Meghan, the answer would have been overwhelmingly positive. Angela Levin had been inside that operation. Months with Harry, access that produces a very specific kind of knowledge. Not the front-of-house version, but the version the staff carries home. What she documented from that tour was a pattern, extremely rude to staff. The behaviour below stairs, where the cameras don't go, where the people who actually make a royal visit function are watching everything. The crowd saw one version, the staff saw another, and the gap between those two versions, the public warmth and the private conduct, is the thread that connects 2018 to a petition with 35,000 signatures in 2026. Australia didn't forget. It just took a while for the second version of that story to travel far enough. Montecito has one rule. You do not make your neighbours' lives smaller to make your own life bigger. You do not bring the machinery of global celebrity, the press, the security convoys, the drones, the chaos, into a community that has spent decades building a very specific kind of quiet. Oprah lives there. Rob Lowe has lived there for 26 years. Orlando Bloom, Katy Perry. People who understand instinctively that the price of that community is discretion. You do not talk to the press about your neighbours. You do not make the Starbucks line longer. You do not make the neighbourhood a date line. Rob Lowe went on record. That matters, because in Montecito, going on record is itself a statement. He said the neighbourhood would never be the same. He said property values went up, but the lines got longer. He said he once saw Harry driving with a ponytail and laughed about it on television, friendly enough on the surface. But Rob Lowe talking to cameras about his neighbours is not a neutral act in a community where the entire social contract is built on not doing exactly that. Then there were the drones. A news agency flew drones over neighbouring properties to photograph the couple's son. Police were called to the home 9 times in 8 months. Trespassing, alarm activations, the machinery of their celebrity landing on people who had specifically chosen a place where that wasn't supposed to happen. The community didn't turn on them loudly. It just quietly stopped, including them. In August 2022, Meghan sat down with the Cut for a profile. It is worth reading carefully, not for the headline quotes, but for the details that slip through when someone is comfortable in an interview. One of those details was about Archie, why he wasn't in local playgroups, why the normal social infrastructure of a Montecito childhood, the groups, the drop-offs, the ordinary texture of a child's life in a community wasn't available to him. The reason given was fame. Archie was too recognizable. The security requirements made normal groups impossible. In Montecito, where Oprah's grandchildren move freely, where every other celebrity family in that zip code, and there are many, has managed to build exactly the kind of ordinary childhood infrastructure that was described as unavailable. Not because those families are less famous, not because their children are less recognizable, but because somewhere in the decision-making, a different calculation was made about what normal looks like and who gets to have it. That answer, more than the spokesperson statement, more than the petition numbers, is the clearest window into the self-perception gap at the center of this story. The belief that the rules of ordinary life apply to everyone in the community except them. That the price of fame is uniquely, extraordinarily higher for this particular family than for the people living 3 streets away. Montecito noticed. These things always get noticed. At what point does a pattern of behavior stop being controversy and start being character? Because Montecito is not an isolated incident. The 2018 tour is not an isolated incident. The spokesperson statement is not an isolated incident. Every single one of these moments follows the same shape. A situation that could have been managed quietly, that became louder because of a decision made by the people at the centre of it. Rob Lowe went on record. The veteran neighbour story spread through the whole community. Montecito has one rule and they broke every version of it. My question is this. At what point does a pattern stop being bad luck and start being something more revealing than that? Tell me in the comments, because that question is about to get a lot more complicated.
I don't think that they realize that they platform these headlines, that they give these stories more oxygen. And the tone of their response about this particular petition, it reeks of animosity. And you understand why the pair are polling so poorly globally. I mean, it just sounded so.
Netflix paid $100 million. That number gets cited constantly as proof of the Sussex brand's commercial power. And it was, in 2020, when the deal was signed, it genuinely was. But here is what that $100 million actually purchased. Not Harry, not Meghan Markle from Suits, not two private citizens building a quiet life in California. Netflix paid for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the title, the institutional weight, the thing they had just very publicly walked away from and were simultaneously selling at maximum volume. Spotify made the same calculation. They signed a royal couple for Archetypes. The show launched. The numbers came in. And when the numbers didn't justify the investment, when it turned out that the audience for a podcast hosted by the Duchess of Sussex was not the same size as the audience for the idea of a podcast hosted by the Duchess of Sussex, the relationship ended. 2 deals, 2 platforms, both paying for the same asset. Both discovering at significant cost that the asset had a shelf life nobody had accounted for. Because the moment you publicly and loudly reject the institution that gives you your value, you start a clock. Netflix and Spotify both found out what happens when that clock runs out. The title was The Product. The product was always the problem. Penguin Random House paid $20 million for Spare. Publishing insiders will tell you, and some of them have, that the advance will never earn out. That is not unusual in publishing. Large advances for celebrity memoirs frequently don't recoup. What is unusual is what happened after. Harry has reportedly been calling Penguin Random House near weekly, asking about royalties, asking when the numbers will improve, asking questions that suggest a fundamental confusion about how book economics work. That $20 million was not a down payment on future earnings. It was the ceiling, and the ceiling has already been reached. The blueprint called this correctly. This is not a royalty dispute. This is a man who collected $20 million and appears genuinely unable to understand that money, even $20 million, is finite. That the Netflix deal ends. That the Spotify deal ends. That the Penguin advance was spent. That the Archwell Foundation took in $2.1 million in donations in 2024 while spending more than $5 million. That the gap between income and expenditure is not a temporary problem to be solved by the next deal. Tom Bauer puts the number at $3 million annually, what the Sussex lifestyle requires after taxes just to maintain its current shape. The Netflix deal is gone. Spotify is gone. The book royalties are not coming. What remains is a speaking fee in the mid-5 figures and a wellness retreat with tickets at $3,199. That is what the Australia trip actually is. Look at the Australia trip clearly for a moment. Harry is speaking at the InterEdge Psychological Safety Summit in Melbourne on April 15th and 16th. The fee is mid-5 figures. Proceeds support Lifeline. That part is real, and it matters. But the fee goes to Harry. That is the structure of the arrangement. Meghan is headlining a wellness retreat in Sydney called Her Best Life. April 17th to 19th. The venue is the Intercontinental Sydney Coogee Beach. currently undergoing renovation, expected to finish just before the retreat begins. Tickets are $2,699 for standard, $3,199 for VIP, 300 people, front row seats and a group photo with Meghan for the premium package. The organizer is the Gemi Agency, a company that collapsed owing $540,000 to the tax office, whose founder told liquidators she has no savings and limited income. A similar event in Fiji, run by the same organizer, was cancelled last year. And then there is Invictus. Harry is attending a planning meeting for a potential 2031 Games bid. He is a trustee. The foundation holds a £26 million UK government grant, confirmed, documented, for the 2027 Birmingham Games. The question of whether any organisational costs connected to this trip are being drawn from foundation funds has not been answered. The Australian Federal Police said they don't comment on protection arrangements. The Department of Home Affairs said they have no involvement. The spokesperson called the question a moot point. A moot point is not a denial. Before I tell you what's about to land, there is a 464-page book. Tom Bauer spent years on it. He talked to people inside the Sussex operation, people adjacent to it, people who watched it from close enough to see the details that don't make the official statements. The book is called Betrayal. It came out on March 26th. It hit #1 on Amazon before most people had finished reading the serialization in the Times. The people closest to the Sussexes have reportedly been dreading this book for months. And here is what that dread tells you, before you have read a single page. People do not dread books that contain nothing true. They do not retain lawyers over fabrications they can easily disprove. The dread is its own data point. The dread is the book's first review, written by the people who know exactly what's in it. Do you think there is anything in those 464 pages that changes how you see this story, or is the verdict already in? Comment now. Because what comes next is where this story stops being about Australia entirely. Here is what both tracks have been building toward. Track A and Track B are not two separate stories. They are the same story told from two angles, the relational collapse and the financial collapse, and they converge on a single structural problem that no spokesperson statement, no wellness retreat, no speaking fee can solve. The Sussex brand requires a royal title to function, not decoratively, structurally. Netflix did not pay $100 million for two private citizens. Penguin did not pay $20 million for a memoir by a California resident. The 300 women paying $3,199 to sit in the front row in Sydney are not paying to meet Meghan Markle from Suits. They are paying, consciously or not, for proximity to something that carries the weight of the institution. The crown, the history, the thing that was very publicly, very loudly rejected. That is the contradiction at the centre of everything. They left the firm, they gave the speeches, they sat on Oprah's sofa and told the world what the institution had cost them. And then they built a commercial operation that only works if the institution's gravity still pulls. For a while, it did. Now the neighbours have stopped calling. The publisher has stopped pretending. Hollywood has gone quiet. And 35,000 Australians signed their names to a document that says, in plain language, we remember, we have been watching, and we have done the math. Australia is not a PR disaster. It is a reckoning, and the reckoning has been a long time coming. Go back to the statement. You have heard it twice now. Once in the first minute, before you knew anything. Once in phase 2, clause by clause, as the words were still landing. Read it one more time. But this time, you have 14 minutes of context sitting behind every word. Of course, if you wanted to dive into the ridiculousness of this petition as an agenda for spreading misinformation, one could equally hypothesize that there are approximately 26.5 million Australians, 99.98% of the population, who haven't signed it, who must therefore agree with the taxpayer picking up the tab for their visit. Of course, that is another equally stupid assertion to make. But hey, why let common sense get in the way of a good story? The first time you read that, the word that stopped you was ridiculous, or stupid, or the audacity of the 26.5 million. Now, after Montecito, after Penguin, after the Gemmy Agency and its $540,000 in debt, after the Invictus question that still hasn't been answered, the word that stops you is different. It's moot. The trip is privately funded, so the petition is moot. The concern is moot. The 35,000 names are moot. The question of who pays for the security convoys, the road closures, the AFP deployment that the Australian Federal Police won't comment on, all of it, moot. That word was chosen carefully. It is doing a great deal of work, and what it is working hardest to avoid is a direct answer. Kinsey Schofield watched that statement land in real time. She is not a tabloid commentator. She hosts Unfiltered, she contributes to Sky News Australia, she covers this beat professionally and has done so consistently enough that her assessments carry a specific kind of weight. The weight of someone who has not shifted her position based on the news cycle, who has acknowledged positive developments when they occurred, and who therefore cannot be dismissed as reflexively hostile. She watched the statement, and she said this. The statement reeks of animosity. You can understand immediately why they poll so poorly globally. That is a communications professional's verdict, not a critic's. The distinction matters. She is not saying the statement is offensive, she is saying it is strategically catastrophic, that it explains, in a single paragraph, why the polling numbers look the way they do everywhere this couple goes. Then she said this. Never complain, never explain. They keep doing the opposite of that. Never complain, never explain. The rule that every royal communications professional learns before they learn anything else. The rule that has protected the institution for a century. The rule that was sitting right there, available when the spokesperson opened their laptop and started typing. They keep doing the opposite of that, not once, not twice, as a pattern, as a default, as what happens every single time the pressure arrives. Rob Lowe has lived in Montecito for 26 years. That matters. He is not a newcomer who arrived after the Sussexes and formed an impression. He is a founding member of that community's unspoken social contract. Someone who understands, from decades of living inside it, exactly what the rules are and exactly what it means when they get broken. He went on record, in Montecito, that is itself the statement. He said the neighborhood would never be the same. He said property values went up, but the lines got longer. Friendly enough framing, the kind of thing you can quote back to someone and they can laugh it off. But Rob Lowe did not have to say anything. Nobody asked him to go on camera. Nobody compelled a 26-year resident of one of the most discreet communities in America to start giving interviews about his neighbors. He chose to, and in Montecito, a choice like that is not casual. The specific claim he made, drones over neighboring properties, police called 9 times in 8 months, is important to state clearly. That is one named on-record account from one specific figure. Everything else reported about the Sussex relationship with their Montecito neighbours comes from multiple outlets, none of them named. Those anonymous accounts form a pattern. Rob Lowe is the only pin in the map with a real name attached. But one named pin from a respected Hollywood figure who had no obligation to speak in a community where nobody speaks. That pin does a great deal of work. Angela Levin published her book on Harry in 2018. She had access that very few journalists have ever had. Months with him, conversations that produced a level of detail that only comes from genuine proximity. She is a regular contributor to Sky News Australia, to GB News, to Newsweek. She has been covering this family for years from a position close enough to matter. You should know where Angela Levin sits. Her position on Meghan is well known. She has not been neutral, has not claimed to be, and anyone citing her work should name that clearly. Her critical stance on Meghan is documented and consistent. Name that. Then consider what consistency actually means. A biographer who has maintained the same account, the same specific claims about the 2018 Commonwealth tour, the same sourcing on staff behaviour, the same pattern documentation, for 6 years without shifting her story based on the news cycle is not the same as a commentator who moves with the wind. Levin has not updated her account to match whatever the current narrative requires. The hot tea incident, the staff conduct, the behaviour below stairs, she reported it in 2018 and has not walked it back once. The question for the viewer is not whether you trust one biographer. The question is why, 6 years after that tour, 35,000 Australians are signing a petition before a return visit. Levin's research does not explain that number, but it sits inside the same pattern that does. Tom Bower is a barrister turned investigative biographer. Richard Branson sued him twice and lost. Robert Maxwell sent him endless legal threats and never won. The tycoon Tiny Rowland called one of his books boring, which is what powerful people say about books they cannot stop. In 40 years of writing about the most litigious figures in British public life, Bower has never lost a lawsuit. That is not a coincidence. That is a methodology. His previous book on Meghan, Revenge, Meghan, Harry and the War Between the Windsors, was a #1 Sunday Times bestseller. The Sussexes called it a fabrication. It sold in enormous numbers and none of its central claims were successfully challenged in court. You should know where Tom Bower sits. He is not a neutral observer. He has never claimed to be. His critical stance on the Sussexes is public, documented, and consistent. Name that clearly. And then consider what it means that the people around the Sussexes have reportedly been dreading this specific book for months. Bower's new book is called Betrayal. It hit #1 on Amazon before most people had finished the serialization. He describes the couple's current situation as a downward spiral, an inglorious endgame. Those are his words, chosen by a man who has spent years inside this story and who does not use words carelessly. People do not dread books that contain nothing true. The dread is the verdict. It arrived before the first copy shipped. Here is what is true about Meghan that this story makes easy to forget. She arrived in the United Kingdom as a genuine outsider. American, mixed race, divorced, walking into one of the most scrutinized institutions on earth, with a press corps that had already decided what it thought of her before she had done anything to deserve the verdict. The hostility from elements of the British tabloid press was not manufactured. It was documented, sustained, and in several cases, actionable. She endured it publicly for years, largely without the institutional support that should have been available to her. The warmth that the 2018 Australian crowd showed her was not manufactured either. Those people turned out in enormous numbers because something about her felt genuinely new, modern, warm, accessible in ways the institution had rarely managed. That reception was earned. Hold that, then hold this. She told a journalist that her child was too famous for neighbourhood playgroups in Montecito, where Oprah's grandchildren move freely, where every other celebrity family manages the ordinary infrastructure of a child's life without describing it as structurally impossible. She described her own son's fame as a barrier that applies uniquely, extraordinarily to this particular family. In a community full of people who are at least as recognisable and have quietly solved the same problem. That answer reveals more about the self-perception gap at the centre of this story than anything her spokesperson has ever typed. The sympathy is real. The gap is also real. Both things are true simultaneously. Here is what is true about Harry, that this story makes easy to forget. He lost his mother at 12, publicly, in front of the entire world, with cameras outside the palace and his grief on display before he had any framework for processing it. He spent the next 20 years performing a role he never chose inside an institution he could not leave. The spare, the backup, the one whose job was to stand slightly to the left and smile. The desire to escape that was not a midlife crisis. It was a man reaching clumsily, but genuinely, for something that resembled an actual life. Hold that, then hold this. He is reportedly calling Penguin Random House near weekly. asking about royalties on a book that publishing insiders say will never earn back its $20 million advance. A man who collected $20 million, who also collected $10 million from Princess Diana's estate at 25, £8 million from the Queen Mother's Trust on his 40th birthday, north of $100 million from Netflix, and appears genuinely unable to understand that money, even that much money, is finite. The desire to escape was real. The reaching was genuine. But somewhere between leaving the institution and building the commercial operation that replaced it, something calcified. The man who wanted a private life built a brand. The man who resented the title put the title on every contract. The man now calling his publisher weekly about royalties that aren't coming is not performing confusion. That gap between the genuine humanity and the bewildering financial decisions is where this story actually lives. The spokesperson deserves a moment of honesty. Their position is structurally impossible, not difficult, impossible. Their client's instinct at every pressure point is to fight back, to respond, to correct the record, rebut the claim, engage the critic. That instinct is not something a communications professional can override in a client who has decided to act. You can advise. You can draft the alternative. You can explain, in precise professional language, exactly why silence serves them better than engagement. And then the client can look at your advice and type anyway. That is the position this spokesperson was in. Whatever they recommended privately, and we do not know what they recommended, what went out publicly was a statement that called 35,000 named organised people ridiculous, conscripted 26.5 million silent Australians as implied supporters, described a legitimate public concern as an agenda for spreading misinformation, and used the word stupid in an official communication on behalf of a couple trying to rehabilitate their global image. This is important to state clearly. That statement is now a permanent exhibit. Every journalist covering the Australia visit has it. Every critic of this couple has it. Every future profile, every retrospective analysis of where the Sussex communications operation went wrong, that statement will be in it. Quoted in full. Attributed correctly. The spokesperson did not create the instinct that produced it, but they signed their name to the output. And in communications, the output is the only thing that exists. Here is my read on this, one time. Then we go to the ending. The Sussex story is not a story about a couple who made bad decisions. Bad decisions are recoverable. Bad decisions can be walked back, reframed, apologised for. What this story documents is something more structurally fixed than that. A fundamental inability to see the gap between how they present themselves and how the world has learned to read them. They present as private citizens who deserve to be left alone. They charge $3,199 for a group photo. They present as people who walked away from the institution on principle. Every commercial contract they have signed since depends on that institution's gravity still pulling. They present as a couple who want nothing from the royal family. Tom Bower's book is called Betrayal, and the people closest to them have been dreading it for months. Nobody put this on record, but the documented picture makes it difficult to avoid. At some point, and that point appears to have arrived, the world stops giving the benefit of the doubt to the gap between the presentation and the reality. Montecito stopped. Hollywood stopped. Penguin is in the process of stopping. And 35,000 Australians signing their names before the plane has left the ground have stopped. The Sussex brand is not failing because its enemies are powerful. It is failing because the contradiction at its centre has become visible to everyone except, apparently, the two people running it. That is not a verdict delivered with pleasure. It is a finding. And findings don't care how uncomfortable they are. The Australia story looks, on the surface, like a PR disaster, a poorly timed trip, a tone-deaf statement, 35,000 people who remembered something the couple apparently forgot. But pull back far enough, and the Australia story stops being a story about Australia. Montecito stopped returning calls. Hollywood stopped issuing invitations. The publisher stopped pretending the math works. Netflix paid for a title. And when the title became a liability, the relationship quietly changed shape. Spotify signed a royal couple. And when the show delivered numbers that didn't justify the investment, that relationship ended too. Now an entire country is signing a petition before the plane has even landed. These are not separate stories. They are the same story, told by different voices, arriving at the same conclusion at the same time. The Australia trip did not break the Sussex brand. It revealed that the brand had already broken, and that the couple flying into Sydney on April 15th either cannot see that or cannot afford to admit it. There is a human truth at the centre of this story that has nothing to do with royalty. When you build a life on borrowed status while publicly resenting the source of that status, you end up belonging to nothing and no one. Not to the institution you left, not to the Hollywood that never fully opened its doors, not to the Montecito community that has its own unspoken rules about discretion, not to the country that remembers the 2018 tour and has been watching what came after. The Sussex brand is not failing because the world has turned against them. It's failing because the product was always a contradiction. Royal enough to command the rooms, private enough to reject the accountability. That contradiction held for a while. It held through Netflix. It held through Spotify. It held through the book. Then, one by one, the people who had been willing to overlook it started doing the quiet math. And the math didn't work. The world hasn't turned against Harry and Meghan. The world has simply figured them out. One question before you go. Should Harry and Meghan drop the Sussex titles completely, go by Harry and Meghan Sussex, and start over as private citizens? Or is it already too late for that to matter? I want to know where you stand.